Mr. President, I have the great pleasure today to talk about a friend. It's a bittersweet moment because that friend is choosing not to stay with us here in the Senate. He didn't run for re-election. He is going back home to Utah. But I want to take a minute to talk about his incredible accomplishments here as a public servant over a 42-year career, over 4 decades here in the Senate. And you know what? Some people come here because they want to be somebody. Orrin Hatch came here because he wanted to do something for people. And boy, he has done that. Time after time, he has stepped up to serve the American people. When Senator Hatch retires, the Senate will be losing not only our president pro tem, that means that he's fourth in line to be president, and he's the president pro tem here of the Senate, the most senior member. But we're also going to lose somebody who over the years has been a mentor for a lot of us, because he's a person who is committed to legislating, to making a difference in the lives of the people of Utah and the people of our great country. He's been a statesman. So at a time of bare-knuckled politics, isn't it nice to have that model? And that's Orrin Hatch. Back in 1976, this kid from Pennsylvania, blue-collar kid from Pennsylvania, who had been then a union member, card-carrying union member, of which he is proud, and later went to law school and became in Salt Lake City a successful litigation attorney, decided to run for the United States Senate. Now, he was running against a 3-term incumbent. Normally, that's not a recipe for success, but he had a rare and impressive victory for a first-time candidate, and he hasn't looked back since. When he got elected, I think he probably was a little surprised, but he also realized that he owed something to the people of Utah, and that was to put his nose to the grindstone and make a difference for them. And that's what he's done. They say he has sponsored more bills that have become law than any other living member of Congress. He might even have that record for any member of Congress, but certainly for any of those of us who are still around. He's the former chairman of the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, also called the HELP Committee. He's the former chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee. He is currently the chairman of the all-powerful Senate Finance Committee. And I say that somewhat jokingly, but truly that committee has jurisdiction over such a broad range of issues, all of which Senator Hatch has touched. I've gotten to work with him on a lot of those issues over the years when I was in the Ways and Means Committee in the House and now in the Senate Finance Committee. We've worked together on tax reform, on anti-drug legislation, on pension legislation, on health care legislation, intellectual property legislation, much more. I also had the honor of working very closely with him when I was U.S. Trade Representative, because the Senate Finance Committee handles trade matters, and he was always extremely involved and engaged in expanding the opportunity for U.S. workers and farmers to sell their products abroad. With a slew of achievements to highlight, it is his most recent accomplishment that I want to talk about very briefly, and that's the devotion he gave to tax reform. Remember, it had been 31 years since we'd had any significant tax reform in this body. And a couple years ago, Orrin Hatch said, you know what, we're going to do this. He set up a bunch of working groups, and they were bipartisan, and I co-chaired one of them with Senator Schumer, who's now the Democratic leader. And he said, let's go to work on this thing. And frankly, a lot of people didn't give him much of a chance. Why? It had been tried previously in those 31 years and had been unsuccessful. And here we are in this partisan atmosphere. How could that possibly succeed? But he kept at it, and he shepherded through the process what I think is historic tax reform, and what I know is helping the people I represent. It's helping small businesses. It's helping American workers. It's helping to give people opportunity that they would not otherwise have had. So 31 years, think about that. Back then, Senator Hatch was a second-term senator. Pete Rose still played for the Cincinnati Reds. Ronald Reagan was president of the United States. After 31 years, it's probably a good idea to update the tax code, and he did that. It's pro-growth. It's resulting in more investment in people and equipment and jobs. And as a result, I believe, you see this expansion of our economy out there. I think it's the biggest single reason for it. Wages finally going up for the first time really in a decade and a half. And families having just a little more cash to be able to spend for their Christmas shopping, for their retirement, for their health care, for their kids and grandkids. That's exactly what Senator Hatch intended when we crafted that new law, and that is a heck of a capstone for an amazing career. I'm also, though, very grateful for his work in other areas, protecting religious freedom, encouraging technological innovation, focusing a lot on the tech community and how we can help here in Congress to either provide legislation that helps them to be successful, which has encouraged this economic growth we've seen in this country in the last several decades, but also getting out of the way when necessary to ensure that technology can continue here in the United States to be at the cutting edge. He even has helped songwriters. Now, some might think that's selfish of him because he's a songwriter himself. But he did it because he realized that songwriters deserved to be able to get a responsible return and to be able to protect their intellectual property that they have embedded in their music and their videos. So he's been a hero to the folks in the music industry as a result. And by the way, he's not done. This week, next week, and the week after, Senator Hatch is leading a bipartisan effort with Senator Brown to save the multi-employer pension system. Now, folks, this is not a task that people take on because it's fun. It's difficult. It's difficult on substance. It's difficult on politics. Who's back in the lead? Orrin Hatch, as co-chair of this select committee this Congress formed to be able to finally come up with a way to keep these pensions from going under, keep the government entity that insures the pensions, which is called the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation, PBGC, from going under, and ultimately to ensure that our economy and thousands of businesses are not impacted so negatively, because we're going to lose a lot of businesses. We're going to lose the ability for us to be able to provide people with their hard-earned retirement money unless we fix this system. Once again, he's at the lead, trying not to do something that's good for or good for him politically, but something that's good for our country that he knows has to be done. So, in my view, Orrin Hatch epitomizes what it means to be a public servant and to be a servant leader, because he does it through leadership. He doesn't have to give speeches on civility. He practices it. Over the years, he's been a model for me of a serious legislator, one focused on delivering results. Perhaps most importantly, he's a gentleman. He's a gentleman who treats everybody with respect, everybody, regardless of your political focus, regardless of who you are in this place, what your station in life is. Orrin Hatch treats you with respect and dignity. Despite all these legislative accomplishments during his more than 4 decades in the Senate, what's he most proud of? His family. I know that. I got to know his son early on when we worked together as lawyers in the first Bush White House. This was about 30 years ago. His wife, Elaine, and he have been together now for more than 60 years. They've got 6 children, 23 grandchildren, and 24 great-grandchildren. Now, that 24 might have increased since I started talking. I don't know. But he's got a lot of them. Even as he retires as the president pro tem of this body, I know he's going to stay busy with the Hatch Foundation. And, folks, he's going to stay busy with that growing family. Shepherding tax reform will be nothing compared to shepherding 47 grandchildren and great-grandchildren this holiday season. So, Orrin Hatch, we thank you for what you have done for your state and your country. I know I speak on behalf of this body as a whole when I say that the impact you've had during your time here in the Senate has been one that has made all of us better by being around you and made this country better. I'm grateful for having had the opportunity to work with you as a colleague, and I look forward to the pleasure of our continuing friendship. Enjoy your retirement, Orrin. Well deserved. Godspeed.